Elena Martinez's silver Corolla still had a quarter tank of gas when she vanished on the outskirts of Las Cruces, New Mexico, a sun-baked desert city with 85,000 residents. August 17, 2005, unfolded under a merciless summer sky, heat waves rippling across empty highways as dust devils danced in the distance. At 1:23 p.m., a gas station security camera captured the 32-year-old teacher purchasing a bottle of water, smiling as she texted her sister, promising to bring homemade salsa to their family dinner that evening. Elena wore a turquoise blouse that matched her earrings, faded jeans, and walked with the confident stride that her students at Las Cruces High School knew well. The attendant watched her step into her car, sunglasses sliding into place as she pulled onto Highway 70. What happened in the hours that followed would plunge Las Cruces into a haunting mystery that lingered for 17 years. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Las Cruces, New Mexico stands where desert meets mountains, where the Rio Grande cuts through sand and rock, creating an oasis in the Chihuahuan desert. The city pulses with the blend of Mexican and American cultures, adobe buildings gleaming red gold in the setting sun, chili farms stretching beyond the city limits. Community bonds run deep here, forged by generations of families who've weathered drought, heat, and hardship together. In a modest adobe home near the historic Mesilla Plaza, Elena Martinez lived alone, but was never lonely. At 32, she taught Spanish literature at Las Cruces High School, her classroom walls covered with student art and quotes from Gabriel Garcia Marquez. Colleagues described her as passionate about education, always the first to volunteer for after-school programs and student mentoring. Elena's family, her parents, older brother and younger sister, lived within a 20-minute drive. Sunday dinners at her parents' home were sacred, a time when the Martinez family gathered to share meals, stories, and laughter. On Wednesday evenings, Elena taught free English classes to migrant workers. Her calendar bulged with community commitments, each one a thread in the tapestry of connection she wove around herself. August in New Mexico brings punishing heat, the kind that makes the horizon shimmer and minds wander. It was the last week before school resumed, and Elena was preparing her classroom, organizing books and lesson plans. On August 17, 2005, she left her house at noon, telling her neighbor she needed to pick up supplies in El Paso, about 45 minutes away. Before heading south, Elena stopped at the Valero gas station on Highway 70. Security footage showed her entering at 1:21 p.m., her turquoise blouse bright against the store's muted colors. She purchased a bottle of water and chatted briefly with the cashier about the heat. At 1:23 p.m., standing by her car, she sent a text to her sister, "Picking up special peppers from that place in El Paso, making your favorite salsa tonight. See you at 7. That mundane message, sent with a smile under the scorching New Mexican sun, became the last known communication from Elena Martinez. Her phone went silent after that moment. No more texts, no calls answered, no social media updates. Elena, who typically responded within minutes, disappeared into the vast desert landscape. By 8:30 p.m., the Martinez family's concern had escalated to panic. Elena's sister, Lucia, called repeatedly, each unanswered ring more ominous than the last. Their brother Miguel drove to Elena's home, finding it empty, neat, exactly as she would have left it for a quick trip. Her lesson plans lay open on the kitchen table, a half-empty cup of coffee beside them, as if she intended to return within hours. As night enveloped Las Cruces, the temperature dropped sharply, the way it does in the desert. Miguel stood on Elena's porch, scanning the street, hoping to see headlights turning into her driveway. Their parents arrived, mother clutching her rosary, father's face etched with worry lines deeper than the arroyos that cut through the landscape. By 10:00 p.m., the Martinez family could wait no longer. Miguel, voice steady but strained, called the Las Cruces police department. "My sister is missing," he told the dispatcher. "This isn't like her. Something's wrong." Within 30 minutes, 2 patrol cars pulled up to Elena's home, their red and blue lights slicing through the darkness. Officers Ramirez and Delgado entered, notebooks in hand, faces professionally neutral. They asked questions that felt both necessary and painful, about Elena's habits, relationships, mental health history, any recent changes in behavior. The family answered, voices growing hoarse with repetition and fear. Could she have decided to stay overnight in El Paso? Officer Ramirez suggested, maybe with a friend? Or her phone died. Miguel shook his head firmly. No, Sunday dinner is tomorrow. She would never miss preparations. And she always carries a charger. Officer Delgado asked what Elena was wearing when last seen. Lucia closed her eyes, visualizing her sister's text. Turquoise blouse. Silver earrings shaped like feathers. Probably jeans. She always wears her silver and turquoise bracelet. It was our grandmother's. The officers wrote everything down. But the family could sense their unspoken assessment. Adults have the right to disappear for a while. 24 hours hadn't passed. Maybe she met someone. Maybe she needed space. The subtle implications felt like salt on an open wound. As the officers prepared to leave, promising to put out an alert for Elena's silver Corolla, her father stood, voice breaking the professional calm. My daughter is a woman of routine and responsibility. If she doesn't show up for a commitment, something has prevented her. Please understand, this is not normal for her. Officer Ramirez's expression softened slightly. He nodded. We'll start looking right away, sir. Outside, neighbors had gathered on the sidewalk, drawn by the police lights. Maria Gomez, who lived across the street, approached Lucia with a thermos of hot chocolate despite the summer heat. For the shock, she explained, pressing it into Lucia's hands. Elena will come home. She must. Other neighbors joined, offering support, agreeing to form search parties at first light. In this tight-knit community, Elena's disappearance wasn't just the Martinez family's tragedy. It belonged to everyone who knew her gentle spirit and generous heart. That night, Elena's home became the center of a growing storm. The landline rang constantly, calls from relatives in Albuquerque, cousins in Santa Fe, colleagues from school. Word spread with the speed and intensity of a desert wildfire. By midnight, a local news van had parked across the street. A reporter standing in the blue-black darkness, voice hushed as she delivered the first public announcement. Las Cruces teacher Elena Martinez has been reported missing after failing to return from a trip to El Paso. The Martinez family huddled in Elena's living room, surrounded by her books, her photographs, the colorful throw pillows she'd embroidered herself. Miguel organized a timeline on a notepad. Lucia scrolled through her sister's recent text messages, looking for clues. Their mother prayed quietly in the corner, hands working her rosary beads. Their father stood at the window, watching the street, as if through sheer will he could manifest his daughter's return. By dawn, Elena had been missing for 18 hours. The early morning news showed her yearbook photo, her bright smile beaming into thousands of Las Cruces homes as people prepared for work. The reporter's words cut through breakfast routines. Police are seeking information on the whereabouts of Elena Martinez, last seen at the Highway 70 Valero station yesterday afternoon. The community response was immediate and overwhelming. By 7 a.m., dozens of volunteers had gathered at Elena's home, ready to search. They organized into teams, armed with water bottles, hats, and determination. Local businesses donated supplies, maps, walkie-talkies, flyers with Elena's photo that came hot off the printer at Kinko's. Las Cruces police officially launched their investigation that morning. Detective Maria Santiago took the lead, her reputation for solving difficult cases preceding her. She arrived at Elena's home early, dark hair pulled back tightly, eyes missing nothing as she surveyed the property. Santiago interviewed the family again, this time asking deeper questions. Had Elena mentioned any problems? Any unusual phone calls? Any changes in her daily patterns? The family shook their heads, their exhaustion evident after a sleepless night. The detective then reviewed security footage from the Valero station. The grainy images showed Elena's last known moments, her smile at the cashier, the casual way she checked her phone before getting into her car. Then a detail caught Santiago's eye, a dark pickup truck pulling out of the station shortly after Elena, turning in the same direction toward El Paso. By mid-morning, search parties spread across Las Cruces and the surrounding desert. Some teams drove south toward El Paso, scanning the highway shoulders and rest stops. Others checked the side roads and hiking trails Elena loved to explore. Everyone carried her photo, showing it to gas station attendants, store clerks, anyone who might have seen her. As the search expanded, police obtained Elena's phone records and credit card statements. Her last cell ping located her phone near the border checkpoint, about 15 miles south of Las Cruces. After that, nothing. Her credit cards showed no activity since the Valero purchase. At 2:09 p.m., nearly 24 hours after Elena's last known contact, a New Mexico State Police helicopter spotted a silver vehicle off an arroyo near the highway, partially hidden by mesquite bushes. The ground team rushed to the location, hearts pounding. The silver Corolla sat empty, doors locked, no signs of damage. Through the windows, officers could see Elena's purse on the passenger seat, her phone charging in the console, keys still in the ignition. Everything suggested she had stopped briefly and intended to return immediately to her vehicle. When the Martinez family arrived at the scene, Miguel had to physically support his mother as she saw the abandoned car. Lucia stood frozen, staring at the empty driver's seat where her sister should be. Their father walked the perimeter slowly, eyes scanning the harsh landscape, looking for any sign of his daughter. Police established a perimeter, treating the area as a crime scene. Forensic technicians photographed everything: tire tracks leading off the highway, footprints in the sandy soil, the interior of the car untouched as if time had stopped the moment Elena stepped away. Detective Santiago stood beside the car, eyes narrowed against the glare of the afternoon sun. No signs of struggle, she noted. No damage to the vehicle. It's as if she pulled over voluntarily. But why would Elena stop in this remote spot? There were no scenic views, no facilities, nothing but scrubland stretching to the horizon. And if she had car trouble, why leave her phone behind? Why lock the doors? As the forensic team worked, search dogs arrived with their handlers. They circled the vehicle, noses to the ground, picking up Elena's scent. One dog, a German shepherd named Rex, led his handler away from the car, following a trail that led toward a nearby arroyo, a dry creek bed that would flood during rainstorms, but now lay parched and empty. The trail ended abruptly about 50 yards from the car. The dog handler frowned. It's like she walked this far and then... He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Everyone understood the implication. It was as if Elena had vanished into thin air. By late afternoon, the scene buzzed with activity. Police vehicles lined the highway shoulder. The helicopter circled overhead. Search teams fanned out in widening circles from the Corolla. News vans parked at the perimeter, reporters broadcasting live updates to an increasingly concerned community. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. As sunset painted the Organ Mountains blood red, Detective Santiago gathered the Martinez family away from the cameras and onlookers. Her voice was gentle but direct. We're treating this as a possible abduction. There's a dark pickup truck that appears in multiple security cameras, following the same route as Elena. We're working to identify it. The word abduction fell like a stone in still water, sending ripples of horror through the family. Until that moment, they had clung to possibilities. Car trouble, a spontaneous detour, even amnesia. Anything but the deliberate taking of their beloved Elena. That evening, Las Cruces held its breath. The local news led with Elena's disappearance, showing footage of her abandoned car, search teams combing the desert, and her family's tearful plea for information. The reporter's voice trembled slightly. Tonight, a community wonders what happened to Elena Martinez. In homes across the city, people watched the story unfold on their screens. Parents held their children closer. Teachers recognized their colleague and friend. Students saw their mentor. The next morning's Las Cruces Sun News bore a front-page headline: Local teacher vanishes, car found empty. The investigation intensified. Detective Santiago established a command center at the police station, walls covered with maps, timelines, and photographs. Officers reviewed every frame of security footage from businesses along Highway 70, tracking the dark pickup that had been spotted following Elena. The truck, a black Ford F-150 with tinted windows and a dent in the rear bumper, appeared in multiple cameras, always a few cars behind Elena's Corolla, all the way to the location where her car was found. Then, like Elena, it disappeared. 5 days into the search, as hope began to flicker like a candle in desert wind, a crucial witness came forward. Jacob Turner, a trucker who regularly drove the El Paso route, had seen something on August 17th, but had been on the road until now. "I was heading north around 2 p.m., he told Detective Santiago. Saw a silver car pulled over. Lady in a blue-green shirt was standing by her car, looking at a map. Then I noticed a black pickup stopped behind her. Man got out, looked like he was offering help. Didn't think anything of it at the time." Santiago leaned forward, pulse quickening. "Can you describe the man?" Turner closed his eyes, concentrating. "Tall, white guy, baseball cap, dark sunglasses. Couldn't see much else from the highway, but he was pointing down the road, like giving directions." This was the first confirmation that Elena had interacted with someone after leaving the gas station. The description matched nothing in police databases. The black pickup had no clear license plate in any footage. They had a shadow, not a suspect. Meanwhile, the community rallied around the Martinez family. Elena's students organized a candlelight vigil in the school parking lot. Hundreds attended, holding lights against the gathering darkness, sharing stories about how Elena had touched their lives. "Miss Martinez believed in me when no one else did," one student said, voice breaking. "We have to find her." Local businesses displayed Elena's photo in their windows. The mayor appealed for information, offering a reward fund that grew as donations poured in. Churches held prayer services. The desert community, accustomed to harshness and survival, showed its true nature, fierce loyalty and unwavering support. 2 weeks after Elena's disappearance, the investigation hit a wall. Every lead had been followed to its end. Every witness interviewed, every inch of desert within a 5-mile radius of her car searched. Elena Martinez had become a ghost, present in memory but absent in flesh. Detective Santiago refused to let the case go cold. She re-interviewed everyone, re-examined every piece of evidence. In Elena's car, forensics had found a single strand of hair that didn't match Elena's DNA. In the dust near the driver's door, they discovered a partial boot print size 12 from a brand of work boots sold at dozens of stores throughout the region. Small clues, seemingly insignificant, but Santiago pinned them to her board, convinced they would eventually form a picture. "Someone knows something," she told her team during late-night strategy sessions. "People don't just vanish. There's always a trace." But as weeks turned to months, the urgent energy of the search transmuted into something heavier. The daily press briefings became weekly, then monthly. Search parties dwindled from hundreds to dozens to handfuls of the most dedicated. Media coverage shifted from front page to intersections. For the Martinez family, time split into 2 streams, before Elena's disappearance and after. They maintained her home exactly as she left it, dusting books she would never read, watering plants she would never see bloom again. They took turns checking her mailbox, paying her bills, keeping her life administratively intact even as their hope fractured. 3 months after Elena vanished, Las Cruces police officially classified her case as cold. The investigation would continue, but resources would be reallocated. Detective Santiago fought the decision, but was overruled. In her final press conference on the case, she looked directly into the cameras, voice firm. "This is not over. We will find Elena Martinez." The community absorbed the news with a collective sense of failure. They had searched every arroyo, every abandoned building, every inch of desert. They had distributed flyers as far as Texas and Arizona. They had kept vigil night after night. And still the desert held its secret. On the first anniversary of Elena's disappearance, the Martinez family gathered at the spot where her car had been found. They built a small shrine, a cross embedded in concrete, adorned with turquoise stones that matched Elena's favorite color. Lucia brought her sister's favorite books. Miguel played guitar, the Mexican folk songs their grandmother had taught them. Their parents stood silent, aged beyond their years, as the desert wind whispered around them. Detective Santiago attended, now working homicide, but still carrying Elena's case file in her desk drawer. She had made a promise, to herself, to the Martinez family, to Elena, that this case would not be forgotten. Every free moment, every weekend, she reviewed the evidence, searching for something overlooked, some connection unmade. As the anniversary vigil ended, Santiago approached the family. "I want you to know," she said, her voice low and intense, "I will never stop looking for your daughter, never." Miguel nodded, unable to speak through his grief. Their mother reached out, clasping Santiago's hand in both of hers. No words were needed. In the fading light, against the vast emptiness of the desert, they stood united by loss and determination. The desert holds many secrets. Some are revealed by time and erosion, layers of history exposed to the sun. Others remain buried, protected by sand and silence. As darkness fell on the anniversary vigil, no one knew that Elena's story was not yet complete, that the desert would eventually surrender its truth, and that justice, though delayed, would find its way home to Las Cruces. As years passed, Elena Martinez's case gathered dust in the Las Cruces Police Department's evidence room. The box labeled Martinez Elena Missing Person 08-17-2005 sat on a high metal shelf alongside other unsolved mysteries. Inside were hundreds of pages of interviews, search maps, forensic reports, and the single strand of unidentified hair found in her car, all waiting for the key that would unlock the truth. For the Martinez family, time did not heal, but rather crystallized their grief into something permanent, a weight carried daily. 5 years after Elena's disappearance, her parents sold their home and moved into a smaller place. The Sunday family dinners continued, but with an empty chair that no one acknowledged yet everyone saw. Miguel Martinez, once a carefree musician, became a paralegal specializing in missing persons cases. The transformation wasn't conscious at first. Just a night class in criminal justice, then another in forensic science, then a complete career change. His colleagues respected his dedication, but whispered about the dark circles under his eyes, the files he reviewed during lunch breaks, the way he tensed whenever a case involved a woman in her 30s. Lucia Martinez channeled her grief differently. She took over her sister's English classes for migrant workers, eventually founding a non-profit education center that she named Elena's Light. On the center's wall hung a portrait of her sister, not the somber missing person photo that had appeared in newspapers, but Elena laughing at a family barbecue, eyes crinkled with joy. "My sister believed education was freedom," Lucia told reporters at the center's opening. "While we still search for her, we continue her work." Detective Maria Santiago kept her promise. Though reassigned to homicide, then promoted to lieutenant, she never fully released Elena's case. Each month she reviewed the file, looking for connections to new cases, angles overlooked. She maintained contact with the Martinez family, joining them for coffee on the anniversary of Elena's disappearance, her presence a silent affirmation that the search continued. Las Cruces itself changed around the absence Elena left. The high school dedicated its library to her memory. Former students, now adults, spoke of how Miss Martinez had shaped their lives. Her image faded from daily conversation, but remained embedded in the community's consciousness, like the ancient petroglyphs carved into desert rock, weathered but enduring. By 2010, 5 years after Elena vanished, the case had grown so cold it seemed fossilized. The initial flood of tips had dwindled to occasional drips, mostly well-meaning but misguided sightings or psychics claiming visions. Santiago investigated each one thoroughly, knowing most would lead nowhere, but unwilling to miss even the smallest chance. The dark pickup truck, their strongest lead, remained unidentified. Though the partial boot print was determined to be from a Red Wing brand work boot, size 12, this narrowed the suspect pool only slightly. Thousands of men in the region owned similar footwear. The unidentified hair yielded DNA, but with no matches in any database, it remained a genetic ghost. On the 5th anniversary, Miguel organized a desert memorial, unlike the somber gatherings of previous years. He invited Elena's former students to release paper lanterns into the night sky, lights against the darkness, hope against absence. Hundreds attended, the soft glow of lanterns rising like earthbound stars. A local newspaper covered the event, running a retrospective on the case. The headline read, "5 years later, the woman Las Cruces cannot forget." The article summarized the known facts, the dead ends, the theories that had emerged and dissolved. It quoted Detective Santiago, "This case isn't cold to me. It's just waiting for its moment." What no one knew was how close that moment was. In early 2011, the Las Cruces Police Department received a federal grant to review cold cases using new DNA technology. Police Chief Ramirez announced the initiative at a press conference, emphasizing the department's commitment to solving long-dormant cases. When a reporter asked which cases would be prioritized, the chief didn't hesitate. Elena Martinez will be among the first. The news reached the Martinez family during Sunday dinner. Lucia's phone buzzed with text messages from friends who had seen the announcement. For the first time in years, she felt something like hope flutter in her chest, fragile, tentative, but present. "Do you think they'll find anything new?" she asked her brother. Miguel's expression was guarded. He had learned to protect himself from hope's sharp edges. "Maybe. The technology has advanced significantly, but we need to be realistic." Their parents said nothing, but their mother's hands trembled slightly as she passed the bread. After years of disappointment, hope felt dangerous, a luxury they could not afford. Yet it took root anyway, quiet and persistent as desert flowers after rain. Lieutenant Santiago personally oversaw the re-examination of Elena's evidence. The mysterious hair strand was sent to a specialized lab in Virginia that used advanced DNA phenotyping, a technique that could determine physical characteristics from genetic material. The partial boot print underwent enhanced digital analysis that might reveal more about the wearer's gait and weight. Months passed with no breakthroughs. The lab work moved slowly, methodically. The Martinez family resumed their lives, hope retreating to its familiar corner. Then, in November 2011, Santiago received a call from the Virginia lab. The technician's voice crackled with excitement. "We've determined characteristics from the hair sample," she explained. Male, likely Caucasian with some Hispanic ancestry, light brown hair, blue or green eyes, approximate age between 30-50 when the sample was left. Santiago's heart raced. This wasn't a name or a face, but it was more than they'd had before, a shadow gaining definition. She immediately cross-referenced the profile against persons of interest from the original investigation. Not matched exactly, but it narrowed the field. Meanwhile, in an unrelated development, New Mexico State Police had begun building a database of vehicular hit-and-runs involving black pickup trucks. It was a long shot, but Santiago requested access. She spent weeks combing through cases, looking for any connection to Las Cruces, to Elena's route, to the time frame. One case caught her attention, a minor accident 2 weeks before Elena disappeared, where a black Ford F-150 with tinted windows and a dented rear bumper had sideswiped a car in a parking lot in Las Cruces. The driver fled, but a witness had partial plate numbers. The case was never solved, but the description matched their mystery truck exactly. Santiago requested the partial plate information and ran it against vehicles registered in southern New Mexico in 2005. The search returned 147 matches, too many to investigate individually, but not impossible if cross-referenced with other criteria. She created a matrix, black Ford F-150 owners, whose vehicles had partial plates matching the witness account, who were male, likely between 30-50 and 2005, possibly with Hispanic ancestry, and potentially wearing size 12 boots. The list narrowed to 23 individuals. Of these, she eliminated those with solid alibis for August 17, 2005, those who had moved from the area before that date, and those whose physical characteristics contradicted the DNA findings. This left 7 potential suspects, 7 men who might know what happened to Elena Martinez. Santiago took the list to Chief Ramirez, requesting resources to investigate each thoroughly. Impressed by her methodical approach, he assigned 2 detectives to assist her. Together, they began the delicate work of investigating these individuals without alerting them to the scrutiny. The Martinez family was not informed of these developments. Santiago had seen too many cases where premature hope led to devastating disappointment. When we have something concrete, she told her team, something they can hold on to, that's when we bring them in. By early 2012, nearly 7 years after Elena's disappearance, the team had eliminated 5 of the 7 suspects through alibis and further investigation. 2 remained. Victor Herrera, a 42-year-old construction foreman who had moved to Colorado in 2006, and Raymond Blackwood, a 45-year-old mechanic still living in Las Cruces. Both owned black Ford F-150s in 2005, matching the partial plate. Both had physical characteristics consistent with the DNA phenotyping. Both worked jobs where Red Wing boots would be common. Neither had solid alibis for the afternoon of August 17, 2005. Santiago's instincts pulled toward Blackwood. His garage was located just off Highway 70, the route Elena had taken. He had no criminal record beyond minor traffic violations, but former employees described him as having a temper, particularly with women. And unlike Herrera, who freely spoke with investigators when contacted about an unrelated matter, Blackwood seemed guarded, suspicious of their questions. The breakthrough came from an unexpected direction. One of Santiago's detectives, reviewing Blackwood's history, discovered he had briefly worked at Las Cruces High School as a maintenance contractor in 2004, the year before Elena disappeared. School records showed he had repaired classroom air conditioning units, including in Elena's classroom during summer break. He knew her, Santiago realized, or at least he had access to her workspace. This connection was thin but significant. It provided the first potential link between victim and suspect beyond the coincidence of the highway route. It suggested premeditation rather than random opportunity. Santiago decided it was time for direct surveillance. For 3 weeks in April 2012, her team monitored Blackwood's movements, photographing his current vehicle, still a black pickup, though a newer model, documenting his routines, and most critically, collecting discarded items that might yield DNA. Coffee cups, cigarette butts, a used bandage after he cut his hand working on a car. These items were sent to the lab for comparison with the hair found in Elena's car. The wait for results felt eternal. Santiago barely slept, checking her phone hourly, jumping whenever it rang. The Martinez family, still unaware of these developments, noticed her absence from their usual coffee meetings, but attributed it to work demands. On May 10, 2012, the lab called. Santiago stepped outside the police station to take the call, squinting in the bright desert sun, heart hammering against her ribs. "Lieutenant, we have a match," the technician said. The DNA from the coffee cup matches the hair sample from the Martinez case at a 99.7% probability. "This is your guy." Santiago gripped the phone so tightly her knuckles whitened. After nearly 7 years of dead ends and false starts, they had him. Raymond Blackwood's DNA was in Elena Martinez's car. Now they needed to understand why and where Elena was. Rather than rush to arrest, Santiago obtained warrants for deeper surveillance and property searches. Blackwood owned a small house on the outskirts of Las Cruces and a 5-acre parcel of undeveloped desert land about 30 miles outside the city. Land he had purchased in 2004, a year before Elena disappeared. This land became the focus of Santiago's attention. It was remote, accessible only by dirt roads, the perfect place to hide secrets. Satellite imagery showed no structures, just desert scrub and a few larger mesquite trees. But something about it nagged at Santiago. Why would a mechanic with modest means purchase useless desert acreage? On June 2nd, 2012, with warrants in hand, Santiago led a team to the property. They brought cadaver dogs, ground-penetrating radar, and forensic archaeologists from the university. The search was conducted with painstaking thoroughness, the land gridded into sections, each examined methodically under the merciless summer sun. By late afternoon, the teams had found nothing significant. Frustration mounted as the sun began to sink toward the western mountains. Santiago stood alone at the property's edge, watching the lengthening shadows, wondering if they had followed a false lead after all. Then one of the cadaver dogs alerted, pulling its handler toward a large mesquite thicket near the property's center. Another dog confirmed, circling and barking at the same spot. Santiago's pulse quickened as she joined the handlers. The ground-penetrating radar team moved in, scanning the area beneath the thorny vegetation. "There's something here," the technician confirmed, pointing to anomalous readings on his screen. "About 4 feet down, roughly the size of—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Santiago called for silence, gathering her team. "We're going to do this right," she said, voice steady despite her racing heart. "By the book. This may be Elena, and if it is, she deserves our utmost respect and care. And we need every piece of evidence preserved for prosecution." As dusk fell, powerful lights were set up around the site. The forensic archaeology team carefully cleared away the mesquite, then began the slow process of removing layers of soil. Everyone worked in near silence. The only sounds, the soft scrape of trowels and brushes against earth, and the occasional directive from the lead archaeologist. At 9:47 p.m., they found the first bone, a human finger, small and delicate. More followed, a hand, an arm, ribs. By midnight, they had uncovered enough to confirm what everyone feared yet expected: the remains of an adult female buried for years in the desert soil. Near the body, they recovered small personal items, a silver and turquoise bracelet, fabric from a turquoise blouse, and 2 silver earrings shaped like feathers. Santiago recognized them immediately from the missing person report. These were Elena's possessions, the ones she wore on that August day in 2005. Santiago stepped away from the site, needing a moment alone. Under the vast, star-filled sky, she allowed herself to feel the weight of the moment. Grief for Elena, relief at finding her, determination to bring her killer to justice. 7 years of carrying this case, of promising the Martinez family answers, had led to this remote desert night. When she returned, her face was composed, her voice clear as she gave directives for the recovery process. They would work through the night, documenting everything with precision. Dawn was breaking when they finally lifted Elena's remains, placing them with gentle reverence into a transport container. Santiago followed the medical examiner's vehicle back to Las Cruces, her mind racing. They had found Elena. They had DNA evidence linking Blackwood to her car. But they needed more to prove he had killed her. Motive, additional forensic evidence, perhaps a confession. Before approaching the Martinez family, Santiago gathered her team at the station. "We're close," she told them, exhaustion evident in her voice, but determination burning in her eyes. "But we need this case to be airtight. No mistakes, no technicalities. Elena and her family deserve nothing less." For the next 2 weeks, they built their case methodically. Forensic analysis of Elena's remains revealed a severe fracture to the back of her skull, evidence of blunt force trauma consistent with homicide. Soil samples from the burial site matched soil found in the wheel wells of Blackwood's old truck, which he had sold, but which they located in El Paso. Financial records showed Blackwood had taken a week off work immediately after Elena's disappearance, his only vacation that entire year. Most damning, Elena's DNA was found on an old toolbox recovered from Blackwood's garage, suggesting her body had been transported in it. The medical examiner estimated the toolbox was the right size to contain a body if the person were in a fetal position. By mid-June, Santiago felt they had enough. It was time to bring Raymond Blackwood in for questioning, and to finally tell the Martinez family that their daughter, sister, and friend had been found. Santiago chose to inform the family first. On a quiet Sunday morning, she drove to their home, where they were gathered for their weekly dinner. When they saw her official vehicle pull up, they froze, sensing that this was no ordinary visit. In their living room, surrounded by photos of Elena throughout her life, Santiago told them everything: the DNA match, the discovery of Elena's remains, the evidence pointing to Raymond Blackwood. She spoke gently but directly, watching their faces move through shock, grief, and a complex relief at finally knowing. "We found her," Santiago said, her professional demeanor finally cracking as she reached for Lucia's hand. "We brought her home." Miguel, who had spent years studying similar cases, asked detailed questions about the evidence, the likelihood of conviction, the process ahead. His legal training provided structure amid emotional chaos. Lucia sobbed quietly, clutching the small turquoise bracelet Santiago had brought, Elena's bracelet cleaned and preserved, the only item the medical examiner had released thus far. Their parents sat in stunned silence, holding each other. After a while, their father spoke, his voice rough with emotion. "Thank you for not giving up on our daughter." The next morning, as the Martinez family began the long-delayed process of planning Elena's funeral, Santiago led a team to arrest Raymond Blackwood. They surrounded his garage before dawn, taking him into custody as he arrived for work. He seemed unsurprised, almost resigned, offering no resistance as they read him his rights. At the station, in an interrogation room with recording equipment running, Santiago laid out the evidence piece by piece: the DNA match, the burial site on his land, the toolbox with Elena's DNA, the skull fracture indicating murder. Blackwood listened impassively, his face betraying nothing. "Why Elena?" Santiago asked finally. "Why her?" For a long moment, Blackwood said nothing, staring at his hands on the metal table. Then he began to speak, his voice flat, emotionless, as if recounting someone else's actions. "She didn't recognize me," he said. "I fixed the AC in her classroom, spent 3 days there, talked to her every day. But when I saw her at the gas station, she didn't know who I was, looked right through me." The pettiness of the motive struck Santiago like a physical blow. Elena had died because she hadn't remembered a maintenance worker from a year earlier. Because a man's fragile ego couldn't bear being forgotten. Blackwood continued, describing how he followed Elena's car, flashing his lights to get her to pull over, claiming he saw something wrong with her tire. How he struck her when she turned away to check, loading her body into the toolbox in his truck bed. How he buried her that night on his remote property, believing the desert would keep his secret forever. As he spoke, Santiago thought about the small moments that had led to this confession: the single hair left in Elena's car, the partial boot print, the witness who remembered a black truck, the lab technician who extracted DNA from a 7-year-old sample. How justice had assembled itself piece by tiny piece, drawn forward by the gravity of truth. When Blackwood finished his confession, Santiago closed her notebook and stood. "Raymond Blackwood, you are charged with the first-degree murder of Elena Martinez." Her voice remained professional, but her eyes held 7 years of determination finally fulfilled. News of Blackwood's arrest spread through Las Cruces like wildfire. The discovery of Elena's remains and the arrest of her killer dominated local media. People gathered spontaneously outside the Martinez home, bringing flowers, candles, and handwritten notes of support. Former students shared memories of Miss Martinez on social media, her influence extending beyond her too brief life. For the community, the resolution brought a complex healing: grief at the confirmation of Elena's death, relief at finally knowing, and a renewed faith in justice's slow but inexorable progress. For the police department, especially Santiago and her team, it validated their persistence and methodical work. But for the Martinez family, the emotions were more complicated. The truth, while longed for, carried its own pain. They had lived for 7 years in the limbo of uncertainty, suspended between hope and grief. Now they faced the concrete reality of Elena's death and the brutal circumstances that took her from them. Yet with that pain came the beginning of genuine healing. They could finally lay Elena to rest properly. They could direct their anger at a specific person rather than at the nebulous unknown. They could move forward, carrying Elena's memory not as an open wound, but as a treasured presence. On June 30th, 2012, nearly 7 years after she disappeared, Elena Martinez was buried in a sunlit ceremony attended by hundreds. Her students, past and present, formed an honor guard, each holding a single yellow rose, Elena's favorite flower. Her colleagues spoke of her passion for teaching, her family of her boundless love. Lieutenant Santiago stood at the back, watching the community come together in collective remembrance. She had kept her promise to never stop looking for Elena. Now she made a silent, new promise to see this case through to conviction, to ensure that justice begun would be justice completed. As the ceremony ended, Miguel approached her, extending his hand. "My family and I want you to know," he said, voice steady despite his grief, "that what you did matters beyond words. You brought our sister back to us. You gave us truth when others gave up." Santiago nodded, unable to speak through the tightness in her throat. In her years as a detective, she had seen the worst of humanity. The violence, the cruelty, the capacity for harm. But she had also witnessed this, the enduring power of love, the unyielding pursuit of truth, the light that remains even after the darkest night. As she walked back to her car under the vast New Mexico sky, Santiago reflected that some cases changed you forever. Elena Martinez had never been just another file on her desk. She had become a promise kept, a truth uncovered, a name that would always remind Santiago why she wore the badge. In the distance, the Organ Mountains stood silhouetted against the horizon, their ancient slopes having witnessed countless human stories unfold beneath them. They had watched Elena disappear, and 7 years later had watched her come home. The desert had held its secret, but not forever. Nothing stays buried in the end. Not truth. Not justice. Not even the smallest strand of hair that leads the way home. Raymond Blackwood's trial began on a crisp October morning in 2012. The Las Cruces courthouse stood solemn against the desert sky as the community gathered, seeking closure for a wound 7 years in the making. Inside the wood-paneled courtroom, the Martinez family sat in the front row, shoulders straight, faces composed, despite the storm of emotions beneath. District Attorney Gabriela Mendez led the prosecution, her reputation for handling difficult cases preceding her. Lieutenant Maria Santiago sat beside her, case files neatly arranged. Her normally windswept hair pulled back severely, professional mask firmly in place. Across the aisle, Blackwood sat with his public defender, his expression blank, eyes fixed on the middle distance. As jury selection began, Santiago studied each potential juror carefully. This case would require people who could process complex DNA evidence, understand the significance of a 7-year investigation, and recognize the weight of circumstantial connections. More than that, it needed jurors who could see Elena Martinez not as a statistic, but as a person, a daughter, sister, teacher, and friend whose life had value beyond measure. The final jury consisted of 8 women and 4 men, ranging from a retired science teacher to a young construction worker. They took their seats solemnly, understanding the gravity of what lay ahead. Judge Hernandez, known for his meticulous attention to procedure, addressed them directly. "You will hear disturbing evidence in this trial," he warned, his deep voice resonating through the courtroom. "You will need to separate emotion from fact, sympathy from judgment. This is not easy work, but it is essential to justice." The trial opened with Mendez's powerful statement, walking the jury through August 17th, 2005, Elena's last day. She described the ordinary beginning. Elena stopping for water at the gas station, texting her sister about dinner plans. Then the extraordinary end, her abandoned car, the years of searching, and finally the discovery of her remains on Blackwood's property. Elena Martinez did not simply vanish. Mendez concluded, her voice ringing with conviction. She was taken. She was killed. And the man responsible sits in this courtroom today. The defense countered with skepticism about the evidence. They acknowledged Blackwood's DNA in Elena's car, but suggested innocent explanations. Perhaps he had helped her with car trouble. They questioned the reliability of DNA evidence after 7 years in the desert. They emphasized the lack of eyewitnesses to the actual crime. The prosecution has built a house of cards, Blackwood's attorney argued. Circumstantial evidence piled upon circumstantial evidence. But where is the proof beyond reasonable doubt? As the trial progressed, Santiago watched the jury closely during her testimony. She described the investigation methodically. The initial searches, the years of dead ends, the breakthrough with advanced DNA technology, and finally, the discovery of Elena's remains. When she spoke of uncovering Elena's body, several jurors lowered their eyes, one wiped away tears. The most powerful testimony came from the Martinez family. Lucia described her last conversation with Elena, the simple text about salsa for dinner, the ordinary exchange that became extraordinary in its finality. Miguel spoke of the 7 years spent searching, of learning criminal justice to better understand what had happened to his sister. Their parents, now in their 70s, described the empty chair at Sunday dinners, the grandchildren Elena would never meet, the life unlived. Throughout their testimony, Blackwood showed no reaction. His face remained impassive, his posture rigid. But Santiago, trained to notice details, saw his fingers tapping subtly against his thigh when Elena's name was mentioned, a tiny tell of discomfort or perhaps something darker. The prosecution's case strengthened with forensic evidence. The medical examiner testified that the fracture to Elena's skull was consistent with a heavy blow from behind, a deliberate act of violence rather than an accident. Soil analysts confirmed that earth from Blackwood's truck matched the burial site. DNA experts explained the advanced technology that linked the hair in Elena's car to Blackwood with 99.7% certainty. Most damaging was the toolbox evidence, Elena's DNA found inside a large metal box recovered from Blackwood's garage. The forensic specialist explained how DNA can persist for years on unclean surfaces, how Elena's cellular material had been preserved in the rust and grime of the box's interior. This indicates that her body was transported in this container, the specialist testified, pointing to microscope images projected on a courtroom screen. The DNA pattern suggests significant contact, not casual touch. The defense fought back, bringing their own experts to question the methodology, suggesting contamination or misinterpretation. But with each witness, their position weakened. The prosecution's narrative grew more compelling, a man fixated on a woman who didn't remember him, whose bruised ego led to violence, who thought the desert would keep his secret forever. On the trial's 5th day, the prosecution played Blackwood's videotaped confession. The courtroom fell silent as his flat voice described following Elena, tricking her into stopping, striking her from behind. The Martinez family held hands tightly, their knuckles white, as they heard, for the first time, the exact manner of Elena's death. "She didn't recognize me," Blackwood's recorded voice stated without emotion. "3 days I worked in her classroom. She looked right through me." When the video ended, Santiago glanced at the jury. Their faces showed a mixture of horror and comprehension, the final piece falling into place. The pettiness of the motive made the crime more terrible, not less. It transformed Elena's death from a mystery into something brutally mundane. A man's wounded pride, a woman's life extinguished. The defense had little to counter with after the confession. They questioned Blackwood's mental state during interrogation, suggested he had been coerced or confused. But the video showed a man speaking clearly, waiving his rights, describing details only the killer would know. As the trial neared its conclusion, both sides presented closing arguments. The defense emphasized reasonable doubt, the years between crime and arrest, the circumstantial nature of much of the evidence. Mendez, for the prosecution, wove together the strands of evidence, DNA, confession, timeline, motive, into an unbreakable cord. Elena Martinez was a light in this community, Mendez told the jury, her voice steady but emotional. Raymond Blackwood extinguished that light because she didn't remember his name, because she didn't recognize him at a gas station. 7 years he thought he had escaped justice. 7 years this family waited for answers. Today you can end that wait. The jury deliberated for just 4 hours. When they filed back into the courtroom, the foreperson's face was solemn but resolved. The verdict was unanimous, guilty of first-degree murder. As Judge Hernandez read the verdict, Santiago watched the Martinez family. Tears flowed freely down their faces, but they were not the desperate tears of grief that she had witnessed for 7 years. These were tears of relief, of justice finally rendered, of a burden partly lifted. Blackwood showed no reaction to the verdict. His face remained as blank as it had throughout the trial, as if he were a spectator to his own life rather than its architect. When asked if he wished to speak before sentencing, he declined with a small shake of his head. Judge Hernandez sentenced him to life without the possibility of parole. Mr. Blackwood, you stole not only Elena Martinez's life, but 7 years of peace from her family and this community. The court finds no mitigating factors to justify anything less than the maximum sentence allowed by law. Outside the courthouse, reporters clustered around the Martinez family and the prosecution team. Miguel spoke briefly, his voice steady despite his tears. Today doesn't bring Elena back to us, but it does bring the truth into the light, and for that we are grateful. Santiago stood slightly apart from the media frenzy, watching the family she had come to know so intimately over 7 years. Lucia caught her eye and broke away from the crowd, embracing her fiercely. "You kept your promise," Lucia whispered. "You never stopped looking." Santiago nodded, unable to speak through the tightness in her throat. In her career, she had solved many cases, but none had defined her like the search for Elena Martinez. None had taught her more about persistence, about the slow unveiling of truth, about justice delayed but ultimately delivered. The media coverage of the verdict and sentencing was extensive. The Las Cruces Sun-News ran a front-page headline, "Justice for Elena, Blackwood sentenced to life." Television stations aired special reports recounting the 7-year journey from disappearance to conviction. National outlets picked up the story, focusing on the advanced DNA technology that had cracked the case. For the Martinez family, the trial's end brought a new phase of their journey. With justice secured, they could finally focus fully on remembering and honoring Elena rather than searching for her or seeking her killer. The Sunday after the verdict, they gathered at her grave, bringing yellow roses and sharing memories that celebrated her life rather than mourning her absence. Lucia expanded Elena's Light, the education center she had founded in her sister's name. With Blackwood's conviction bringing renewed attention to Elena's story, donations poured in. The center grew from a small classroom to an entire building, offering not only English classes but comprehensive educational support for immigrant families. "My sister believed education opened doors," Lucia told reporters at the expanded center's opening. "Every student who walks through these doors carries her legacy forward." Miguel continued his work as a paralegal, specializing in missing persons cases. The skills he had developed during his sister's case made him uniquely qualified to help other families navigate the complex legal and emotional landscape of searching for lost loved ones. He partnered with the Las Cruces Police Department to create a cold case volunteer program, training civilians to assist with reviewing old files and identifying new leads. For Santiago, the case's resolution brought professional recognition but also personal reflection. The department awarded her a commendation for extraordinary persistence in solving a cold case. She was promoted to captain and given oversight of a new cold case unit, inspired largely by her work on Elena's case. Yet on quiet nights, when paperwork was done and the office empty, Santiago would sometimes open her desk drawer and touch the small turquoise stone she kept there, a gift from the Martinez family after the trial. It reminded her that behind every case file was a human story, a network of lives forever altered, a truth waiting to be uncovered. The case changed Las Cruces itself. The community that had been divided by rumors during Elena's disappearance united in the wake of Blackwood's conviction. People spoke more openly about safety, about watching out for one another, about the importance of not turning away from difficult truths. Las Cruces High School established a scholarship in Elena's name for students pursuing education careers. Each year, they held a memorial assembly where former students spoke about her influence on their lives. What began as a solemn remembrance evolved into a celebration of teaching, of mentorship, of the ripple effects one life can have on countless others. In the years following Blackwood's conviction, advances in forensic technology continued to transform cold case investigations nationwide. The Elena Martinez case became a model studied in police academies and forensic programs, demonstrating how persistence, technological innovation, and community involvement could solve seemingly hopeless cases. Detective academies invited Santiago to lecture on cold case methodology. She would begin each presentation with Elena's story, not the technical details of DNA collection or witness interviews, but the human elements. She wanted new detectives to understand that behind every unsolved case was a family waiting, a community wounded, a truth demanding to be told. Cold cases aren't truly cold, she would tell them, her voice carrying the weight of experience. They're waiting for the right moment, the right technology, the right detective who refuses to let them go. 5 years after Blackwood's conviction, the New Mexico state legislature passed Elena's Law, enhancing funding for cold case investigations and mandating the creation of a statewide DNA database specifically for unresolved cases. The Martinez family stood behind the governor as he signed the bill, their faces solemn but proud. What had begun as their personal tragedy had transformed into a force for systemic change. The law's impact was immediate and profound. Within its first year, the enhanced DNA database helped solve 12 cold cases across New Mexico, bringing closure to families who had waited decades for answers. Santiago, now overseeing the program's implementation, felt a deep satisfaction watching other detectives experience the moment she had lived with the Martinez case, the instant when a cold trail suddenly warmed, when the impossible became possible. On the 10th anniversary of finding Elena's remains, the Martinez family organized a different kind of gathering. Instead of a memorial focused on loss, they created a celebration of justice and remembrance. They invited everyone who had been part of the case, the original search volunteers, the forensic technicians, the prosecutors, and especially Santiago and her cold case team. The event was held at Elena's Light, which had grown into a thriving community center. Photos of Elena covered the walls, not just the somber missing person image that had appeared in newspapers, but snapshots from throughout her life. Elena laughing with students, hiking in the mountains, cooking with her family. These images reclaimed her from the narrative of victimhood, restoring her wholeness in public memory. Santiago arrived late, having come directly from closing another long-dormant case. As she entered, the crowd parted, and the Martinez family came forward to greet her. They had aged, as had she, Miguel's hair now flecked with gray, Lucia's face lined with experience, their parents moving more slowly but with the same dignity. "We wanted to show you something," Lucia said, leading Santiago to a wall near the center's entrance. There, freshly installed, was a plaque that read, "Truth finds a way," in honor of Lieutenant Maria Santiago and all who never stop searching. Santiago stood speechless, touching the engraved words with trembling fingers. In her career, she had never sought recognition, viewing her work as simply what was required by the badge she carried. This acknowledgement, from the family who had lived the case alongside her, touched something deeper than professional pride. "I don't know what to say," she admitted, voice uncharacteristically unsteady. "You don't need to say anything," Miguel replied. "You showed us with your actions what commitment truly means. This center exists because Elena lived. It thrives because you ensured her story was completed, not just with tragedy, but with justice. Later, as the gathering continued around her, Santiago found a quiet moment with the Martinez parents. They sat together in the center's small garden, surrounded by desert plants that had been coaxed into blooming through careful tending. "There's something we never told you," Elena's father said softly. "In those 7 years, there were times we wanted to let go, to accept that we would never know. The not knowing was so painful. But each time we saw you still searching, still believing, it gave us strength to continue." Her mother nodded, taking Santiago's hand. "You carried hope for us when ours faltered. That is a gift beyond measure." Santiago thought of the lonely nights, reviewing the case file, the dead ends, the moments of doubt. She had never imagined that her persistence had served not just the cause of justice, but as a beacon for this family. That knowledge transformed her understanding of her work and its meaning. As sunset painted the desert in gold and crimson, the gathering moved outside. Lucia distributed small paper lanterns to everyone present. One by one, they lit them and released them into the darkening sky, not as symbols of loss, but as affirmations of light persisting against darkness, of truth emerging from obscurity. Santiago watched the lanterns rise, carrying the collective memory of a community that had refused to forget, a family that had refused to surrender, and a detective who had refused to abandon the search. The desert that had once held secrets now witnessed their illumination. In the years that followed, the impact of Elena's case continued to ripple outward. Elena's law expanded to neighboring states. The cold case unit Santiago established became a model for departments nationwide. The Martinez family's journey from victims to advocates inspired other families facing similar tragedies. Santiago herself continued solving cold cases until her retirement 15 years after Blackwood's conviction. Her final act before turning in her badge was to visit Elena's grave, placing a small turquoise stone beside the headstone that matched the one she had carried all those years. "We found the truth," she said quietly to the desert air, and it changed everything. The story of Elena Martinez, teacher, daughter, sister, catalyst for change, became more than a tragedy. It became a testament to the power of persistence, to the enduring nature of truth, to the capacity of justice to arrive even after hope seems lost. Her life, though cut short, continued to teach lessons more powerful than any she might have delivered in her classroom. In Las Cruces, children who had never known Elena grew up attending the center bearing her name. Detectives who had never worked her case studied its methodology. Families facing similar losses found comfort in knowing that answers could come even after years of silence. Raymond Blackwood remained in prison, his name fading from public memory while Elena's legacy flourished. The man who had sought to erase her had instead ensured that she would be remembered long after his own life was forgotten, a final justice more powerful than any court could pronounce. On cool desert evenings, when the sunset turns the Organ Mountains to gold and shadows stretch long across the valley, the people of Las Cruces still tell Elena's story. They speak of the teacher who vanished, the family who never gave up, the detective who kept searching, and the community that found healing in truth. They remind one another that secrets buried in desert sand will eventually be revealed, that justice delayed is not justice denied, that light always returns to dispel darkness. And in police academies across the country, new detectives learn the first rule of cold cases from instructors who studied under Santiago. No case is truly cold until the truth is found. No victim is ever forgotten if someone continues to speak their name. No search is ever in vain if it is conducted with persistence and purpose. For in the end, as Santiago often said when asked about the Martinez case, the desert holds many secrets, but none of them forever. Time, technology, and human determination form a force more powerful than silence, more enduring than concealment. Truth may be delayed, may be hidden, may seem lost beyond recovery, but it remains, waiting beneath the surface for those committed enough to uncover it. And when that truth finally emerges into the light, as it did for Elena Martinez after 7 years in darkness. It changes not just one case or one family or one community. It changes our understanding of justice itself, reminding us that some things are worth waiting for, worth fighting for, worth never giving up on, no matter how many years pass or how cold the trail becomes. The desert surrenders its secrets not to time, but to those who refuse to forget, who continue searching long after others have turned away. This is the legacy of Elena Martinez and Maria Santiago, a legacy of persistence rewarded, of justice delayed but ultimately delivered, of light returning after the longest night. 20 years after Elena Martinez disappeared in the New Mexico desert, her story continued to resonate through lives transformed by its long journey toward truth. What had begun as a tragic mystery evolved into a powerful legacy that reached far beyond Las Cruces, touching communities and cold case investigations nationwide. In August 2025, on the 20th anniversary of Elena's disappearance, a national documentary filmmaker arrived in Las Cruces. Sophia Chen had built her reputation on thoughtful explorations of cold cases, focusing not on sensationalism, but on the human stories behind headlines. Her latest project centered on cases solved through advanced DNA technology, and Elena's story stood as a pioneering example. Chen's first interview was with Captain Maria Santiago, now retired after 30 years with Las Cruces Police. They met at Elena's Light Education Center, sitting in the garden where desert wildflowers bloomed against all odds. Santiago, her once dark hair now silver, still carried herself with the same quiet determination that had driven the investigation decades earlier. Looking back 20 years later, Chen asked, adjusting her camera, what do you consider the most crucial element in solving Elena's case? Santiago considered the question, her weathered hands resting on the turquoise stone she still carried. Most people would say the DNA technology, the genealogical breakthroughs, those were essential tools. But tools don't solve cases, people do. What solved Elena's case was refusal. Refusal? Chen prompted. Refusal to let her be forgotten. Refusal to accept that some questions can't be answered. Refusal to believe that time erases truth. Santiago's eyes, still sharp despite her age, focused on the distant mountains. Elena's family refused to stop searching. The community refused to stop caring. And I refused to close the file. This theme of refusal, of standing against the tide of time and forgetting, became the documentary's central thread. Chen spent weeks in Las Cruces, gathering stories from everyone touched by the case. She interviewed Miguel Martinez, now a prominent advocate for missing persons' families and architect of cold case review programs in 3 states. She spoke with Lucia Martinez Reyes, who had transformed Elena's Light from a small education center to a statewide foundation supporting immigrant education. Most poignantly, she sat with Elena's parents in their modest home. Now in their 90s, they had lived to see not only justice for their daughter, but the flowering of her legacy across 2 decades. For 7 years, we lived with not knowing, Elena's mother told Chen, her voice thin but resolute. That is a pain like no other, not knowing if your child is alive or dead, suffering or at peace. When Maria found Elena, it broke our hearts all over again. But it was a different kind of breaking, one that could begin to heal. Her husband nodded, adding, in our culture, we believe our loved ones are never truly gone, as long as their names are spoken, their stories told. Elena lives through every student who learns at her center, every case solved because of her law, every family who finds answers because of what happened here. Jen's documentary took shape as a meditation not just on crime and justice, but on the power of community memory and individual determination. She followed the ripple effects of Elena's case through time. The cold case unit Santiago had established, now the most successful in the Southwest. The annual scholarship recipients pursuing teaching careers in Elena's name. The families across New Mexico who had found answers through Elena's law. One such family was the Thompsons, whose daughter Kimberly had vanished in 1998. 7 years before Elena, her case had gone cold until the expanded DNA database, created under Elena's law, identified her remains in 2015. Chen brought together Janice Thompson and Lucia Martinez Reyes for a conversation about grief, waiting, and the complicated relief of finally knowing. When they told us they had found Kimberly, Janice said, eyes welling, I thought of your family immediately. I remembered watching the news when they arrested Blackwood, seeing your faces. I thought, that could be us someday. And then it was. Lucia reached across the table, taking Janice's hand. Our stories are connected now. Elena's and Kimberly's, all these years later. The documentary also explored how Elena's case had transformed forensic investigation itself. Chen interviewed Dr. Rebecca Winters, the DNA specialist whose work on the hair sample had helped identify Blackwood. Now a leading figure in forensic technology, Winters had gone on to develop methods that reduce the amount of genetic material needed for identification, advances directly inspired by the challenges of the Martinez case. Working with that single hair strand pushed me to question our limitations, Dr. Winters explained. If we could get usable DNA from that sample, after 7 years in a desert environment, what else might be possible? Every breakthrough in my career traces back to that question. Chen also traced the evolution of Las Cruces itself over the 20 years since Elena's disappearance. The once small desert community had grown significantly, but unlike many expanding cities, it had maintained its tight-knit character. New residents learned Elena's story almost as civic history, the teacher who disappeared, the detective who never gave up, the family who kept faith, the community that rallied around truth. At Las Cruces High School, Chen filmed the annual Elena Martinez Memorial Assembly, now a tradition spanning nearly 2 decades. Current students, none of whom had been born when Elena taught there, performed readings of her favorite literature and shared how her scholarship program had shaped their educational journeys. The school's principal, himself a former student during Elena's time, addressed the assembly with emotion in his voice. Miss Martinez taught us that stories matter, that through literature we connect across time and difference. Her own story continues to teach us perhaps the most important lesson, that truth has no expiration date. Chen's documentary captured these interconnected narratives, weaving them into a tapestry that spanned 20 years of healing, growth, and transformation. But as production neared completion, an unexpected development added a final, powerful chapter to the story. Raymond Blackwood, 65 years old and serving his 20th year in prison, requested to speak with Lucia and Miguel Martinez. The request came through his prison chaplain, who indicated that Blackwood, facing terminal cancer, wished to make amends before his death. The request threw the Martinez family into turmoil. Their parents, now elderly and fragile, wanted no contact with the man who had stolen their daughter. Miguel initially refused outright, seeing the request as Blackwood's final manipulation. But Lucia, after days of reflection, decided she would go. I need to look him in the eye, she told Chen, who had become a trusted confidant during the documentary process. Not for him. For Elena, for myself. Chen asked if she could document the meeting for the film. After consultation with her brother and parents, Lucia agreed. This is part of the story too, she said simply. The hardest part, maybe, but still part of the truth. The meeting took place in the prison infirmary, where Blackwood had been transferred as his condition worsened. Security cameras recorded the encounter from multiple angles, while Chen's single camera captured the human dimensions that institutional surveillance missed. The tension in Lucia's shoulders, the frailty of Blackwood's once imposing frame, the weight of 2 decades pressing down on both. Blackwood had aged dramatically in prison, his face gaunt, his once dark hair gone completely white. When Lucia entered, he struggled to sit up, his handcuffed wrists limiting his movement. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other across 20 years of pain. Thank you for coming, he said finally, his voice raspy from the cancer spreading through his lungs. Lucia said nothing, her face a mask of controlled emotion. "I know nothing I say changes what I did," Blackwood continued. "I know that. But before I die, I needed to say it to someone who loved her. I'm sorry. More sorry than words can express." "Why?" Lucia asked, the single word carrying the weight of 20 years. Blackwood shook his head slowly. "I've asked myself that every day for 20 years. The reason I gave then, that she didn't recognize me. That was true. But it wasn't the whole truth." He paused, gathering strength to continue. "I was nothing. A nobody, invisible, but Elena, everyone saw her. Everyone remembered her. She lit up rooms just by walking into them. When she didn't know who I was, after I'd worked in her classroom, fixed her air conditioning. It broke something in me, something already cracked." "So you took her light because you had none of your own," Lucia said, not a question but a statement of terrible clarity. Blackwood nodded, tears slipping down his hollowed cheeks. "I can't change what I did. But I want you to know, I've seen what's happened since. The education center in her name. The law, the case is solved. Even in here we hear about those things. Her light didn't die with her, it grew." Lucia's composure cracked slightly, tears welling in her eyes. "My sister was more than what you did to her. She always will be." "I know," Blackwood whispered. "That's why I needed to see you. To say that I know that now." Too late, far too late. The meeting lasted less than 15 minutes. No dramatic forgiveness was offered or sought. No profound catharsis transformed grief into healing. Just two human beings acknowledging a terrible truth that connected them across decades, one seeking some measure of peace before death, the other carrying the weight of absence that would never fully lift. As Lucia rose to leave, Blackwood spoke once more. "There's something else. Something I never told the police." His voice trembled. When it happened. Elena said something. Her last words. "I've carried them all these years." Lucia froze, torn between wanting to know and fearing the knowledge. She said, "My family will look for me." Blackwood's voice broke. She was right. You never stopped looking. Chen's camera captured Lucia's face as these words registered, grief and vindication mingling in equal measure. Without responding, she turned and left, her back straight, her steps measured, dignity intact, even in this most difficult moment. Blackwood died 3 weeks later, his death barely noted in local papers, a footnote to a story that had long since moved beyond him. When Chen showed Lucia the footage of their encounter, asking permission to include it in the documentary, Lucia watched it silently, tears streaming unchecked. "Use it," she said finally. "All of it. People need to understand that justice isn't the end of the story. It's the beginning of a different one." The documentary, entitled Desert Truths, the Elena Martinez story, premiered at the Sundance Film Festival in January 2026. It received standing ovations and critical acclaim for its nuanced exploration of grief, justice and community resilience. But its most powerful screening took place in Las Cruces itself, where hundreds gathered at Elena's Light Education Center for an outdoor viewing under the desert stars. The entire community attended, current and former police officers who had worked the case, teachers and students from Las Cruces High School, families who had found answers through Elena's law, and at the center of it all, the Martinez family, now spanning 3 generations. Elena's parents, though frail, insisted on attending, watching from wheelchair seats of honor. As the final scenes played, showing the education center bustling with students, the cold case unit solving another long-dormant case, and the annual memorial scholarship being awarded to a bright-eyed future teacher. Santiago's voice narrated, "Some people think cold cases remain unsolved because the evidence disappears, because witnesses forget, because time erases truth. But that's not why. Cold cases stay cold because people stop looking, stop caring, stop believing that answers matter." The screen showed images of Elena throughout her life, teaching, laughing, living, intercut with scenes of her legacy, the students learning at her center, the detectives using techniques pioneered in her case. the families finding closure through her law. Elena Martinez disappeared on a hot August day in 2005, Santiago's voice continued. For 7 years, the desert held its secret. But some secrets aren't meant to stay buried. Some truths demand to be told, no matter how long it takes. And some lights, the brightest ones, can never truly be extinguished. The film ended with dawn breaking over the Organ Mountains, the same view Elena would have seen on her last morning. As the credits rolled, the assembled community remained seated, silent tears on many faces, hands clasped in shared remembrance. This wasn't just a film screening. It was a communal ritual of memory and healing. Afterward, as people mingled under the desert stars, Santiago found herself approached by a young woman in a police uniform, her badge gleaming in the soft lighting. "Captain Santiago," the officer said respectfully. "I'm Detective Olivia Reyes. I work cold cases now. I just wanted to say, your work on the Martinez case is why I became a detective." Santiago studied the young woman, seeing her younger self reflected in the officer's determined expression. "How many active cold cases are you working, Detective Reyes?" "3 main ones," Reyes replied. "A 2010 disappearance in Alamogordo, a 2014 unidentified remains case near White Sands, and a 2016 missing hiker in the Sacramento Mountains." Santiago nodded. "And what have these cases taught you so far?" Reyes considered the question carefully. "That time is both enemy and ally. That technology evolves, but human determination is still the decisive factor. That every victim deserves someone who refuses to stop looking." A smile touched Santiago's weathered face. "Then you've learned the most important lessons already." She reached into her pocket and pulled out the small turquoise stone she had carried for 20 years. "Here, this has helped me remember why we do this work. Perhaps it will do the same for you." As Reyes accepted the stone, the symbolic passing of a torch, Chen's camera captured the moment, the final scene not included in the premiered documentary, but added as a coda for its wider release. It provided a perfect visual metaphor for the film's central message, that the search for truth is never truly completed, but passed from one generation to the next. That justice is not a destination but a journey without end. In the months following the documentary's release, its impact rippled outward. Cold case units across the country reported increased funding and public support. Families of missing persons found new platforms to share their stories. Law enforcement agencies implemented enhanced DNA databases, modeled on the one established by Elena's law. The Martinez family continued their work. Their grief transformed over decades into purposeful action. Miguel expanded his advocacy to the national level, testifying before Congress about the need for standardized protocols in missing persons cases. Lutia retired from daily management of Elena's light, but remained its guiding spirit, mentoring the next generation of educators, carrying forward her sister's vision. Elena's parents lived to see their daughter's story reach millions through the documentary, finding solace in knowing that her legacy extended far beyond Las Cruces. When they passed away, her father in 2027, her mother just 3 months later, they were buried beside Elena, the family finally reunited after decades of separation. Santiago, in her retirement, became a sought-after consultant for cold case investigations nationwide. The methodology she had developed while searching for Elena, that patient, meticulous gathering of fragments that eventually formed a picture, became standard practice in police academies. She often began her lectures with the same words: "No case is truly cold until the truth is found." Detective Olivia Reyes carried Santiago's lessons and her turquoise stone into her own investigations. Within 2 years of the documentary's release, she had solved the White Sands unidentified remains case, bringing closure to a family that had waited 12 years for answers. The stone sat on her desk as she worked, a tangible reminder of the persistence required for such work. Las Cruces itself embraced its role as the birthplace of innovations in cold case methodology. The police department established an annual symposium, drawing investigators from across the country to share techniques and experiences. The event always began with a visit to Elena's light, grounding participants in the human story behind the forensic details. Chen's documentary received numerous awards and sparked a renewed national conversation about cold cases, missing persons, and the families left behind. But perhaps its most significant impact came from the personal stories that emerged in its wake, viewers contacting Chen to share how the film had inspired them to advocate for overlooked cases in their own communities. One such viewer was Jordan Washington, a journalism student from Chicago whose older brother had disappeared in 2018. Motivated by the Martinez family's persistence, Washington launched a podcast investigating his brother's case. The attention generated by the podcast led to new witnesses coming forward, and within 6 months, the case was solved. His brother had been the victim of a robbery gone wrong, his body hidden in an abandoned building. "I watched Desert Truths 17 times, Washington told reporters after his brother's killers were arrested. "The Martinez family showed me that giving up wasn't an option. That time doesn't erase truth. It just means you have to look harder." Stories like Washington's multiplied across the country, families finding new determination, law enforcement applying new techniques, communities rallying around long-dormant cases. Each success strengthened the central message of Elena's story, that no disappearance should be forgotten, no question left permanently unanswered, no family abandoned to endless uncertainty. 25 years after Elena Martinez disappeared on a hot August day, Las Cruces held another memorial. Unlike the somber gatherings of early years, or even the healing ceremonies of later times, this event celebrated transformation, how a single life and its untimely end had catalyzed changes that saved others, brought answers, and strengthened the fabric of communities nationwide. The memorial took place at the expanded Elena's Light campus, now a complex of buildings serving thousands of students annually. Representatives from cold case units across the country attended, many wearing turquoise pins symbolizing their connection to Elena's legacy. Families who had found answers through techniques pioneered in her case shared their stories. Teachers who had received the Elena Martinez Memorial Scholarship spoke of carrying her educational philosophy into new generations. Miguel and Lucia, now in their 50s, addressed the gathering together, their first joint public appearance in years. Miguel had moved to Washington, D.C. for his advocacy work, while Lucia remained rooted in Las Cruces. Yet standing side by side, the family resemblance was striking. Both carried Elena's determined spirit in their posture, her compassion in their eyes. 25 years ago, we lost our sister, Miguel began, his voice carrying across the hushed crowd. For 7 years, we searched without answers. For 18 years, since finding those answers, we've worked to ensure no family endures what we endured. Today, we gather not just to remember Elena, but to celebrate how her story has changed thousands of lives. Lucia continued, "My sister believed education was the key that opened doors to better futures. She could never have imagined that her own story would become its own kind of education, teaching persistence, community, and the enduring power of truth." Santiago, now in her 70s but still commanding attention when she spoke, offered the closing remarks. Standing beneath the desert sky that had witnessed both Elena's disappearance and the long journey toward justice, she addressed not just the assembled crowd, but the generations to come. "The desert holds many secrets," she said, her voice carrying the weight of experience and the lightness of wisdom. "But secrets are not the same as truths. Secrets hide in darkness. Truths wait in the light. Our job, as investigators, as families, as communities, as human beings, is to keep searching for that light, no matter how long the darkness persists." She paused, looking out at the faces before her, the next generation of detectives, teachers, advocates, and citizens who would carry this work forward long after she was gone. Elena Martinez disappeared in 2005. The desert held its secret for 7 years. But the truth, Elena's truth, continues to emerge, continues to change lives, continues to bring light where there was darkness. That is her legacy. That is our responsibility to carry forward. As the sun set behind the Organ Mountains, painting the desert in gold and crimson, those gathered released paper lanterns into the darkening sky, not as symbols of loss, but as affirmations of illumination continuing against all odds, of truths revealed after the longest night, of justice that may be delayed but will not be denied if we refuse to stop searching. For in the end, as Elena's story taught us, the desert holds its secrets only as long as we allow it to. The truth remains, patient and enduring, waiting for those with enough determination to uncover it. And when that truth finally emerges into the light, it changes everything. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.